Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Luma video. In today's video, we're taking a look at the track breakdown for my song SKYLINE2204, which is on all streaming platforms now, and if you haven't taken a listen to it yet, make sure to do that. As you can see in this project file, we have so much automation. Let's just take a listen to the first part of it and then get into a breakdown of how all of these sounds were created. Here's the intro. What you hear here is a few different things. We have a few samples going on here, and then we have a bass that introduces itself throughout the intro. At the beginning, it's not audible, but then at the very end, you have this very intense increase in sound and energy. A few ways this is done is through the automation and also inside the sounds here. But before we take a look at the main sound that we hear, let's just take a look at some of the other sounds here, because I think they're kind of funny. This AE radio call. So if I make a unique instance of the sound here and remove all of the changes that I've made to it, you can hear this is what the original sounds like.
This is Dog 2-5 requesting air support at coordinates Fox George 42. Over.
Roger that, Dog 2-5. I got tank.
And this was taken from Half-Life audio files, I'm pretty sure. I think I looked through just the audio files that were on some of the games that I had installed and found that, and it sounded really cool. I wanted it to be kind of cryptic and sound a little bit like abstract. And then we also have this like radio Morse code that plays, and these are both being sent to the same mixing track. So we have some reverb, dumpster fire, and I promise you I'm not stealing this plugin. I've bought the plugin. I can't find the code. Please, Freak Show Industries, I promise I buy your plugins. Really like their philosophy, and I'm glad I can still use it without the code. This is a really good plugin for just kind of like experimenting. As far as I know, it's like a vocoder, spectral morph delay. I'm not really sure all the things that it does, but it can get things to sound very interesting by using it. Additionally, we have this free plugin called Codec, which really can just crush your signal into something unimaginable, but it's great for making things sound like they're on like a phone call or whatever by just reducing bitrate. So that's what's happening with those. These are the automation clips for that. At the end here, we're increasing the packet disorder, which makes things sound very, very glitchy. And then all of these automation clips underneath the reconsolidated version of the track, we have automation to pan it, decrease reverb, increase reverb at the very end here, add some automation to the EQ. This pitch bend is actually related to the pattern up here. So this is the patch that's used throughout the entire song. If you look here, it's these two oscillators, but if we just listen to it by itself, it sounds nothing like the original. And that's because what's actually creating the most tonal parts of the song isn't coming from the actual Serum patch here. It's actually coming from the Serum 2 patch that's on the effect rack. And if we take a look at that Serum 2 patch, you can see that it's taking the audio in and then using filters with really high resonance and lots of automation to create those tonal sounds. And so this is very similar to a technique called car plus string synthesis, which I love, but this is doing it in a kind of a different way. Typically, you'd use noise sample as the exciter to start the process of feedback and resonating certain frequencies. But in this case, we have just the ticks that we get from the original sound that we have here. And you can hear when we get into the main part of the song, We start with a very fast-paced buzzing sound, and then it goes into a tempo-synced transient pluck sound. And that's all done through the pitch automation that is on this original synth. So this LFO1 adjusts the coarse pitch here. That's just what it's creating, and it's adjusting some of the symmetry of the waveform to get that transient pluck sound. When we look at the waveform here, right here on a sawtooth wave, this is where we get the most like plucked sound when it snaps from 1 to -1. And so by adjusting that to the beginning, we can get that to really sync up with the tempo. And to actually get it like tempo synced was just kind of trial and error, just adjusting the coarse pitch. How we're actually getting this to turn into a tonal sound is by sending it to that Serum 2 patch here. And then this first Combs filter isn't actually what's creating the tonal sounds. It's more of a phase disperser. So it just kind of screws with the harmonics of the sound in different ways. So if I turn like the filter 2 off here, it almost sounds like a disperser is being put on it, which isn't too far off from what is happening, but it's just a Combs filter. And what's actually creating the sound that you really hear is a different Combs filter, which is more based around like harmonics. So what's being modulated are all these macros, and if we go into the matrix here and look at what these macros are doing, they're just on like filter 1 and filter 2, resonance and VAR, which I think is the damp for this, and the LP frequency, low pass frequency for this. So that's how that sound is created, and the same goes with the other sound here, which is also being played. These MIDI out patches aren't being used for Serums here. What they're actually being used to is change the frequency at which these Serum 2 effect filters resonate at. As you can see, they are key tracked, and if we go into here, the MIDI is 2, this port is 2, this MIDI port is 1, and our original track that goes to here, we have our key track on, and we have our input port here. These MIDI outs are actually just controlling the frequency that the effects resonate at. So this is a really good way to create kind of like asynchronous tonality, where one sound is playing at the root note, but we're resonating, say, like a fifth above it. It creates a very unique sound profile for each of the sounds that are playing. These macros do the same things, but for each one of the string sounds, because they're essentially the same patch. I don't think there's really much of a difference. The only thing that we have that isn't those two serums in the piano roll is this, that uses the same resampled sound from the intro, just chopped up and played via MIDI. And on this track, the effects, we have a few different techniques that I like to use. First, limiter, just to make sure that each one of the plucks is at a similar gain before we send it through the effect rack. An OCS 45, which is a cassette simulator. This is set to downsampling, which is what's doing some of the work to create that dilapidated audio. And then a delay, which you can very clearly hear. An EQ, just some pretty minimal changes. And then a reverb, which is set to about 30%. And this is the technique that I like to use to make the dry signal clear, but also have the reverb tail really stand out and give it space. And that method is by using a really strong compressor. So remember, we already are compressing the signal here. So this compressor isn't doing much to the dry signal, but if we send the dry signal in really strong, so it's very loud, it will make sure that any reverb that we have applied to it will essentially be turned down by the compressor. But as soon as that dry sound stops playing, the compressor is still going to try to heavily compress whatever's going through it, and since it's only left with the reverb, then you get this very loud reverb tail. So you get the best of both worlds, where you have a dry input signal and a very strong reverb tail. Aside from that, for the samples, we have a bunch of Kashmir orchestral drums, which I love. These are such great sounds. And then we have a kick here. And then this kick is using a automation on the sidechain track. For this first part here, we have very similar themes throughout. One of the philosophies that I had though was I don't want sounds to play twice. So you'll see that occasionally there will be a different modulation going on. For example, we have these two which are identical, and then we have one going here which is different, and another here which is different, and then these two are the same. This is different, this is different. And by combining and like mix matching each of these modulation sources, you can create new sounds and patterns that didn't exist before. And also in the actual MIDI, we have different things happening throughout pattern 1, and then pattern 3 is different from pattern 1. Every bar is unique from the last one, which I thought was, again, really important in creating this like very organic sounding track. You can also see this pitch bend automation, and this isn't a pitch bend on the resonators, it's a pitch bend on the exciters, which creates the rhythm of the string transients. That's what the pitch bend is changing, because if you remember, the exciters, these ones here, are tempo synced using the coarse pitch. So by adjusting the pitch of those, you can create variations in the rhythm. Like so. It allows for a lot more creativity when it comes to the rhythm side of things. We also have a few different automation clips up here just to control some reverb. So for this part, we really draw out that lead sound. So just introducing some reverb there allows it to emphasize the kind of like space that that sound is giving, because everything else kind of pauses, like the kicks here and the snares. And then going into the outro here, we also have a reverb as well. Another interesting thing that we can do here is by using just one source here to create the exciter signal, we can combine notes here for the Serum 2 that's resonating. And because these two filters here are polyphonic, meaning you can use multiple notes to create multiple different filters at different frequencies, you can create chords out of these resonators using only one input signal. So that's what these are doing here. You can really create a bunch of different chords using the exciters, which is really neat. And again, lots of different automation going on. We have our bass patch doing a very similar thing, except not creating chords, just giving us the bass pattern. And then at the very end, we have this crescendo. And that's how the song ends. I created this when Serum 2 was like first coming out, so having multiple different filters is really useful for like the Car Plus Strong synthesis method. Looking at the mastering track, a few different things that I think are interesting here. One of the things is I wanted to preserve the dynamics of the song because we have so many individual little ticks coming from the exciters and thus creating transients in the string sound, that I didn't want to compress it all that much because there's a lot of quiet parts as well, and it flows nicely. Starting off, some dynamic EQ. This Pro Q has the ability to do side EQ, which means basically separating the stereo, which you can perceive as like right in front of you. If you have something in mono, it's going to sound like it's right in front of you. And the more width you add, the more side sound is going through it. And typically you want to avoid having too much side in your low end. So that's what this is doing here. It's just cutting anything before 50 hertz in the low end to make sure that the bass is in mono. Just a little bit of dynamic EQ on the low end, and then a compressor here that compresses heavily on the low, but the mid and highs aren't doing anything. And then the master, if we take a look at what's actually being compressed here, you can see rarely it even starts compressing above this point, which if this is linear here, you're not going to get any compression until there's something above this point. So really we're only compressing the really high peaks, so allowing all of those dynamics to go through the signal. This limiter actually isn't doing anything if we look at it how it is, but this is a method that I use to make sure I know exactly what a soft clipper is doing. Because if you look at the soft clipper here, there's really no indication of what it's actually doing. I mean, we can see this meter here telling us when it's reaching a threshold, but we really don't know like what the output signal looks like compared to the input signal. But we can kind of predict what it's going to do if we use a limiter and turn the ceiling down here so it's at 0 dB. And make sure to turn off the 0.2 dB limiter safety. Limiter safety is just going to like decrease the output level by 0.2, which is not what we want. We want to know exactly when we're hitting 0 dB. So by turning this on and then turning our envelope to hard clip by turning off the attack, release, and sustain, we can see what is going through it and what is going over 0 dB. And if we know that, then we know what the soft clipper is going to clip and when. So if we play this during the loud parts, we can see a lot of what's going to be clipped is that ticky transient sound that we get from the strings. Earlier I talked about preserving dynamics, and you might think that contradicts this. And while that's kind of true, there's a reason why it doesn't. And that's because when you have a very sharp transient, taking off the top part of that transient by hard clipping it isn't going to change the perceived loudness of that sound. While it might clip differently, say you have a readout of plus 2 dB versus 0 dB, what you're going to actually hear isn't too different. It's a lot harder to tell when a transient is peaking versus a sustained loud sound. If you say have a sustained noise signal at 2 dB versus 0 dB, it's going to be very audible that one's louder than the other. But when you have very short transients that are peaking at plus 2 dB versus 0 dB, there's almost going to be no difference. And that's good because that means we can increase our gain and get the same result except louder. Loud sounds better. Like a loud song, and I'm pretty sure this is scientifically proven, will sound louder than the same song but just played quieter. So after the soft clipper, we have just an EQ and then a hard clipper that's actually going to hard clip. It's not just going to show a readout, and that's just doing like 2 dB of gain here. So we can see exactly what it's actually hard clipping. Which again is just the extreme loud points of the song. Going back to what I said earlier, when something is going over the threshold of 0 dB, it'll make it quieter without actually making it sound quieter. And after this limiter, we just have a balance. And this balance is to control the intro audio level, so we don't start off the song with like a pop or a click or anything like that, as I want this intro to very smoothly introduce itself. And then the outro with the reverb and the delay tails here. If I didn't have this balance here, that could go on for a minute and have my audio file be super, super long. So by cutting this, it just makes sure I can control exactly when the end of the song happens. I hope you enjoyed watching. Again, if you haven't listened to the song, please add it to your playlist. Listen to it. I'd really appreciate it. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next video.